All right. So right now we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on the Massachusetts 54th. Absolutely love this group. This is one of the very first, not the first, but one of the first, and certainly the most prominent of the colored regiments of the U.S. Army, right, in the Civil War. And what we're going to see is that uh, at the time, prior to the Emancipation Proclamation, black soldiers were not allowed, or African Americans were not allowed to join the military. Now, though, with the Emancipation Proclamation, there's a greater push, and they're finally being allowed to join. Um, and so we start to see a large influx of freedmen or former slaves that are wanting to join up and do their part, right, to fight for freedom. We see that they're being recruited, and this is really prominent in places like Massachusetts, where you had kind of had the heart of that abolition movement. So while there wasn't a large population of free blacks there, there were over 1,000 that joined up out of Massachusetts to form the 54th. What we're going to see is that black soldiers really served in completely segregated units. They were paid less than whites, and they often had very different jobs. What we're going to see, excuse me, is that most black regiments were forced to do kind of menial tasks. They were cooks. They were digging ditches and latrines and building necessary fortifications. But they were often behind the lines, kind of doing the kind of grunt work. Now, that is work that does have to be done in a time of war, but to many blacks, that felt like they were being used once again as slave labor. They were being paid, although they weren't being paid as much. And so they wanted an opportunity to fight. They felt like they had more to fight for, and they were not really being given the opportunity. Now, some of the black regiments, usually attached to larger units of white regiments, were able to help liberate plantations. They would march through the South and begin to liberate these plantations, oftentimes because their presence would be felt as less of a threat, right? So if you were born into slavery and you're in the South on a plantation, and up comes a group of black Union soldiers dressed in their uniforms, proudly marching, right? That's a big deal, right? And so it begins to be used as a bit of a recruitment tool as well, because the sense of pride, I can't even imagine what that would be like to see other people who looked like them kind of coming through and helping to liberate, and just what an incredible sense of pride that would have had to been felt. So they were begun to be used in that way as well. Now, the Massachusetts 54th was led by a guy named Colonel Robert Shaw. And he came from a very respected abolitionist family in the North. He was very young. Not a lot of officers wanted to accept that type of post. But because he came from a prominent family and so forth, he accepted the post where others wouldn't. He was only 25 years old at the time, and he treated his men with dignity and respect. He trained them just as he would train any other soldiers. And it took some time, but of course, that earned the respect of his men as well. While they were paid less, one of the things that we see is that Colonel Robert Shaw and his officer corps denied their payment. They would not accept that as well until his men were paid an equal wage. And so, really, kind of fighting the racism and whatnot on multiple fronts, and trying to really prove their value and their worth on the battlefront as well. So what we're going to see is that when the 54th finally does see action, they prove themselves to be really very good because they're well trained and because they were given the opportunity. They proved to be outstanding soldiers. They won in a number of different skirmishes, proved themselves to be brave and honorable and very capable, and that really opens the door for future opportunities, right? Not only for them but for other black regiments as well. Begins us down that road of talking about equality because they're doing a job equal to that of white soldiers, right? Now, Shaw and 272 of his 54th Regiment are going to be killed as they lead a charge on Fort Wagner. Very inspiring, very heroic. Shaw did not lead from behind. He didn't give orders and send his men. He actually led right up front. In fact, some reports even have him helping to carry the regimental colors or carry the flag. which was not something that generals did, right, or colonels did. You gave the order and then you followed in the rear. And he was not willing to do that. He led his men, and I think that inspired many of them on. But of course, that's where he and many of his regiment meet their end. If you're not familiar with it, the movie Glory was phenomenal, won several Academy Awards, but it really does this justice. A lot of historical movies maybe over embellish or kind of depart uh, from the truth a little bit, but this one was really well done and has a great cast. I would encourage you to watch it. It does them all very, very well. So anyway, that's just a little bit on the colored regiments and specifically about the Massachusetts 54th. It's an important step, right? Because we start to see as the country is going to have conversations about equality, there's still going to be segregation, there's still going to be racism. But this kind of begins to prove the point that when given the same opportunity, when given the same level of training, and when given the same types of leadership, that African Americans are able to accomplish just as much as anybody else. And so really kind of opens many doors and is often maybe overlooked at times. So wanted to give a shout out to the Massachusetts 54th and love their story. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Leave me any comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, guys.